on a second. I just checking out how much 60 million is. Just divided by even an exchange rate of 140, right? Okay, so it does come to 428,571 US.
Yes.
If I do the 60 million divided by 140, 428,571. So that is how much it raised in US terms. And then it said 30-something thousand was taken out for.
Oh, 400,000.
Pardon?
But that no. But no, Zahra. So the man making that in the charity, and he went into the charity to take out that.
He will say he never necessarily took that out for himself. He may have raised it for investment purposes for the charity, right? So let us say some charities, as you know, will raise money and they will also invest some of it so that the earnings from the interest can do charitable projects. That is something that charities do. So the idea of investing in a bond might just be for the continuity of the charity. Where the challenge came in was more from the standpoint of the fact that the Integrity Commission, the DI, had found evidence that the way that this situation was set up was that money from Positive Jamaica was supposedly used to fund this bond. And yet when it was called, right, and the proceeds of the interest came out, that it went to, I believe it's to Andrew Holness or his Imperium Investments, right?
Yeah,
I'm going to try and find a section in the Integrity Commission report related to that. Pardon?
It went to Imperium Investments. It never go back to Positive Jamaica Foundation.
Well, it went back to Positive Jamaica Foundation eventually, but the Integrity Commission is saying after they had made contact with NCB Capital Markets.
Wow. Zahra.
So this whole so this whole thing of you know, the charity, it seems that the charity benefited, yes, at some point for sure, but was that something
ethical?
Well, the DI has a viewpoint on it. I don't know if you want me to go into that.
Yeah, what did the DI's viewpoint on it state again?
All right. Trying to find the section. Remember that this is a big document, so you have to bear with me with certain things.
We're bearing with you, man. Bearing with you.
Right. Okay. So discussion of the findings.
Jamaica, I know a lot of you appreciate what we're doing here because many of you are not going to sit down and read a report of 170 plus pages. So we're trying our very best to dissect it for you. So please appreciate what we're doing. Please appreciate what we're doing. As I said, please appreciate, and we're going to take it further.
Okay. All right. So this is, all right. It states the value of the instrument to be US $94,000. And the officer at NCB Capital Markets confirmed that this is what they relied on by the entity.
Yes.
As it relates to the number of units to purchase on behalf of Mr. Holness, that is US 94,000. NCB Capital Market indicated it only takes written instructions from clients in respect of bond instruments. These instructions are captured in either a bond letter or a bond purchase agreement. Mr. Holness is presented with statements of account on a regular basis, which clearly shows the value of the instrument, that is US $94,000 in addition to interest. Mr. Holness has not before June of 2024 indicated that his intentions were not as documented in the bond purchase agreement. NCB Capital Markets has indicated that the bond was called early and the proceeds and principal transferred to Mr. Holness's holding company Imperium on September 22, 2020. No corrections can therefore be made to the bond agreement as it was originally crafted. It no longer exists. The actions taken by NCBCM on behalf of Mr. Holness on June 24, 2024 were therefore based on fresh instructions from him and not a correction as he stated in his July 16, 2024 response. So the evidence, okay, this goes on. The evidence indicates that on October 21, 2020, adjustments were made to Mr. Holness's account on the basis that funds belonging to Positive Jamaica Foundation were erroneously deposited in said accounts. Now, this seems to be for a different bond, right? The transaction was reversed on October 26, 2020. There was no indication at this or at any other stage that the US 94,000 bond was incorrect and should instead be US 61,892.98 prior to the DI inquiries in June 2024. And the full proceeds of the US 94,000 bond, inclusive of US 32,107, which is now being said to belong to Positive Jamaica Foundation, were transferred to Imperium and reinvested by that entity. In other words, the portion allegedly belonging to Positive Jamaica Foundation formed part of Imperium's assets for over 3 years and was appropriated by that entity as it deemed appropriated. I think that's what you said, as it deemed. Okay, yeah? The funds were only remitted to Positive Jamaica Foundation after inquiries were made by the DI.
So the long and short is?
The foregoing raises questions. This is the long and short. The foregoing raises questions as to whether Mr. Holness's alleged use of funds belonging to a charitable foundation to partially fund the acquisition of a personal asset amounts to misappropriation. The DI finds in the circumstances that an investigation by the FID is warranted. That's the long and short. That is the investigation that the DI at the Integrity Commission wants the FID to conduct in part.
This is the part where I'm saying it was a correction that needed to be made, and the FIDs, the IC is saying that there's a lot of cloud around this bond agreement. Okay,
so let us get this straight, right? What I seem to be saying here is that $94,000 of money, a bond worth 94,000 US dollars was purchased. Okay, 32,000 of that, 32,000 approximately of that was money that allegedly came from Positive Jamaica Foundation. Okay, and 60-something thousand came from the Prime Minister, right? So what they're saying is that even though this money came from Positive Jamaica Foundation, when the bond was turned in, right, and all the interest came out and all the various bits of it, the interest was actually not turned over to Positive Jamaica Foundation, even though the money to invest had come from Positive Jamaica Foundation. Instead, the money formed part of Imperium's assets, and Imperium Investments Holdings is Mr. Holness's, where he has his assets. When he wound down ADMAT in St. Lucia, where he had his assets, those assets were turned over to Imperium. Imperium and Positive Jamaica essentially had put together to buy this $94,000 bond, but when the interest from this bond came in and the proceeds came in, the money was turned over to Imperium to reinvest and not Positive Jamaica Foundation. And so the DI started to ask questions, and then instructions were received from Mr. Holness at NCB Capital Markets to put the money into Positive Jamaica Foundation's accounts or whatever their asset base was. And so the DI is saying, before he was asking the questions, he's saying it raises a question as to whether Mr. Holness's alleged use of funds belonging to a charitable foundation to partially fund the acquisition of a personal asset amounts to misappropriation. And that's why he's asking for the FID to investigate. Now, I want to point out, remember that Mr. Holness has his own story to back this up, or to, not to back it up necessarily, to counter it, I should say. Okay?
Yes.
So
what was his counter response?
Okay. So now,
I look like you will love this report, you know, Zahra, because you're saying, boy, I have fix the camera properly, Zahra, because the people are seeing the beautiful Zahra well. Yes. Thank you.
This is a challenge. I'm so challenged, right? Because I'm trying to work the computer at the same time for a lot of research.
We still have to look at the beautiful Zahra. So, what was the counter response of this gentleman?
Okay, so let me see if I have my phone. Okay. He said it in Parliament, and he also had, I'm going to pull up his statement to Parliament just so that we can see what he had to say about it. Hold on.
Producer, do you have the statement that the Prime Minister made in Parliament last week, Tuesday? I think that is the one.
It's here. I found it. Okay, it's just a matter of the section now. Hold on. Okay. All right, this is how he says it. I reject the finding that I acquired an asset for which the source of fund is not adequately explained. The Commission pointed out that this whole episode started with an incorrect statement from a bank. Hold on a second. Okay. The Commission pointed out that this whole episode started with an incorrect statement from a bank. So too was the asset in question, the subject of errors by the financial institution that managed the asset. While I authorized the transaction from the outset of the acquisition of the asset in 2019, I was unaware that the financial institution had assigned an amount in error to my account from an associated company. A year later, the investment instrument, a bond, was called by the issuer, and the financial institution made another error and pooled my funds with the associated company funds. As soon as I discovered this pooling error, I alerted the institution and instructed that the accounts be correctly separated. However, the initial incorrect assignment was not corrected at that time. I only became aware of the discrepancy when the institution alerted me in June of this year. Once it was brought to my attention...
It took him almost 4 years to realize that that error was made, Zahra.
That is what he's saying. And he said, once it was brought to my attention, the funds incorrectly assigned to my account in 2019 was rectified.
The man come tell me and you, the Prime Minister, who is so erudite and so hands-on, made an error from 2019 and corrected it in 2024.
Well, he's saying the financial institution was the one that made the error.
So he never realized that error all this time. But how would the financial institution get authority to take money from the charity? Wouldn't he have been the one to giving them the authorization?
That's just it. And I think that's where the DI is saying is that NCB Capital Markets takes written instructions from clients, right? And so he was also presented with statements of accounts over the years, clearly showing that the value of the account was $94,000 in addition to interest.
But probably, Zahra, he wouldn't be able to monitor the accounts. Remember, it's 28 accounts, you know.
That's maybe, true, but that's still a large sum, and I would think that somebody would know that their account isn't as plush as that if let's say I invest $64,000 in something and I see it's gone up to $94,000 plus interest. I wouldn't have to, if I open the statement over a couple of years, it's not 1 year, it's not 2 years, it's 4 years. I wouldn't have to question where the rest of the 30-something thousand on the statement is coming from, or is that just him assuming that eventually the two accounts would become separate? You know what I mean? Like, there are some other components to all of this, I would say to you. Yeah. And then there was a statement that was put out, I think, after the fact. But to be honest with you, I don't fully understand it. That's why I'm hesitant to go in there. And I think
you don't have to go there, because I'm trying to get a financial analyst tomorrow night to dissect aspects of them financial things there. I hope the person will respond.
This isn't so much a financial thing. This is about somebody, after this report, I guess, was put to the Parliament. There was another addendum that was added from somebody at NCB Capital Markets, I believe, right? Trying to explain how this whole Positive Jamaica Foundation error could have happened and all the various bits of it. I can try to pull it up, but I can tell you it's going to take me a little time to pull it up, and I don't fully understand it. So
maybe the this of Zahra. Don't worry yourself.
But I believe that whatever it is may have supported Mr. Holness's position, to be fair to the conversation, right?
Okay.
So I'm not sure it does, but I think so.
That is something to look into, and I'll follow up on that. NCB Cap tomorrow. Don't worry yourself.
Okay. But the DI concluded what he did based on the evidence that was presented, including from people at NCB Capital Markets as well, that the DI, the FID should investigate this kind of intermingling that was going on.
Well, we're to see if the FID, I gather that the FID says they'll be looking into the claims by the Integrity Commission. So let us see how that advances and where it goes. Zahra, I want us to look tonight into his three companies: Esther Bridge, Imperium, and Positive Media. I remember you were doing some reporting on those companies some time ago. What were your findings about these companies the Prime Minister was formulating? I remember there was something with a Mr. Azan and something, and then there was the one with Mr. Brown. So I wanted to tell us more about these three companies that the Prime Minister saw. Are they actual companies? From your research, are they shell companies?
Okay, so I would say they're more holding companies to me, look like that. Anyway, let me tell you that. All right, remember in 060 when I first did my report, and incidentally, for people who want to be in the know about these kinds of reports ahead of everybody else, you can always sign up on my website, www.18degreesnorth.tv, because this Estate Bridge, Imperium, Positive Media Solutions, it has come to the fore in September for everybody to see. But if you had been watching 18 Degrees North or reading 18 Degrees North, you would have at least known on a name-by-name basis, not these details like what the Integrity Commission accomplished, but you would have at least noticed some of the information about the fact that Mr. Holness had dissolved his ADMAT Incorporated in St. Lucia, and what he ended up doing. Because remember now, he had owned the Shenstone Drive house, which is the mansion, with ADMAT. He had also owned Wycliffe Close, a lot up in Beverly Hills, right? He had owned those two properties. So what happened when ADMAT was closed down in 2021? He basically split the two properties as two different owners, okay? So what he did was the Shenstone Drive house became owned by Imperium. Imperium is a company that was incorporated in Jamaica, okay? And it's to hold assets. And Mr. Holness, in the Integrity Commission report, they do make a thing about the fact that the assets owned by ADMAT were transferred to Imperium. Right? Except for Wycliffe Close, which is the other lot that is up in Beverly Hills. That land was purchased by ADMAT for about $15.2 million in 2008. So, no, sorry, I'm getting confused with the Acadia apartment, excuse me. It was purchased by ADMAT in 2009, okay, 2009. And it was in 2021 when ADMAT was dissolved, it was transferred to Estate Bridge, which is another company that is owned
by Mr. Holness.
Well, initially owned by Imperium, which is owned by the chairperson at
UDC and HAG.
Right, housing agency. And that falls under Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, which has its own issues because the Prime Minister is also the Minister of Economic Growth and Job Creation, and Norman Brown reports to him. So here you have two business partners, essentially. Mr. Holness assigning this person to head up agencies that deal with housing, and they are involved in a housing development. So there's a lot of mix-up. Anyway.
There's a lot of bangarang.
It's a lot of mix-up. Sijia Anderson, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it as a sister, she was also part of Estate Bridge. So just think about it this way. Imperium is essentially backed by Mr. Holness.
So him don't, yes, and we agree that him don't have any shareholder in Imperium except himself, based on research.
Right. Some shares are unallocated, but we don't know who those belong to.
Who those shares were went to.
Or if they've been issued to anybody. Estate Bridge, as I said, Sijia Anderson, 2,000 shares. There were 10,000 shares in full. Sijia Anderson, 2,000 shares. That's the sister of Mr. Holness. Norman Brown, 2,000 shares. Imperium, at the time, 5,001 share when it was incorporated. Yeah, and it was incorporated in July of 2020. And then 999 shares unassigned. So 999 unassigned, right? Now, it is interesting to see the construction in terms of accounts for Estate Bridge. Because remember, we're talking about initially now when it was incorporated.
Yes.
According to the Integrity Commission report, it says that Estate Bridge had an NCB account. And if you look at who was the signatures on that account, it said Mr. Holness, Sijia Anderson, and Norman Brown. They were the signatories for Estate Bridge. Okay?
So Holness sister.
Mr. Holness himself and Norman Brown were signatories to the NCB account for Estate Bridge. No, there was another account that was Estate Bridge, and this was at NCB Capital Markets. Right? As of 2021, only Mr. Holness was the signatory on that account, right?
On the Capital Market account.
Right, for Estate Bridge, right? And he signed as CEO, Managing Director, and Executive Director. However, he was removed as a signatory in 2022 from that account. So he no longer was a signatory as of 2022 on that account at NCB Capital Market. So they seem to have two accounts, a checking and like a current and savings account at NCB regular, and then a
so he removed himself from the Capital Market account.
Correct. Right.
So who took over the signatory for that the Capital Market account?
You know what? I read it, but it's not clear to me from the Integrity Commission report who is the signatory now, right? But what I can tell you is that the shareholding kind of changed for Estate Bridge, right? And this was in 2022. The share allocation changed. And this is what the Integrity Commission wrote. They said that Norman Brown, he went from having 2,000 shares in 2020 to 1,000 shares. Sijia Anderson kept her 2,000 shares. Imperium forfeited 4,100 shares, representing a $38.6 million value. So they were curious about that. And then Adam Holness, which is Mr. Holness's son, he got 1,000 of the Imperium shares, and then he also got, I guess, an additional 1,000 shares because he ended up with 2,000 shares.
So the son now get 2,000 shares in Estate Bridge.
It's Estate Bridge.
Estate Bridge.
Estate Bridge Development, yeah. And so that is the ownership of Estate Bridge, right? So we don't know anymore. You know, it doesn't seem like Mr. Holness is directly, in terms of share allocation. But I need to compare these findings of the Integrity Commission in terms of Estate Bridge shareholdings with some information that I had pulled that, I don't really think it's the same exact thing. So they seem to have some different things. But anyway, the point is that Estate Bridge owns the Weekly Close land up in Beverly Hills, where development of 4 townhouses is either going on or has finished. Last time I checked, which was much earlier this year, it was still going on, but the construction was there. And they also owned, as I pointed out yesterday from the Integrity Commission report, 2 properties down in Trelawney,
Yeah, the Trelawney.
Stonebrook Manor. So that is what Estate Bridge has in terms of properties, but it has seemingly other assets as well.
What other assets they have, though, Zahra, that you came across?
Oh boy, hold on, let's see. Try to get out everything. Okay, so it says that I think some of that is the same land, right?
So they're probably lands that are
the assets. Hold on. So the assets are total is 145.2 million for Estate Bridge. Land developed and under construction and development is 53.68 million, and then other investments totaling 91.5 million. It's not clear what those other investments are to me. Yeah. So the assets overall, 145.2 million. Estate Bridge.
But you don't know what that 95 million represents.
91.5 million.
91.5.
I'm not clear from the Integrity Commission report. I'm not clear.
So when this company, Zahra, was doing their what would I call them, annual tax returns, was this one of the companies that Mr. Holness filed nil?
According to the Integrity Commission, yes, let me just try to pull it up. I think, oh boy.
I really wanted to answer that one.
Estate Bridge. There was a nil return filed that I know, yes.
There was a nil return.
Estate Bridge said that there was some documentation, management accounts that Mr. Holness had turned into it that indicated that the Estate Bridge had earned interest and income of around $1 million for the year ending 2021. Even though they had activity, they filed a nil return. But, to be honest with you, there and Imperium as well, I would point out, I'm going to make a point about these nil returns, right? Yes. But hold on a second, let me just say this. Imperium also had activity. It had oh boy, Imperium. Okay, $5.1 million worth of income and $9.8 million worth of expenses in 2021. And for 2022, it had $6.5 million worth of income and $9.5 million worth of expenses, right? Now, if you look at the expenses versus the income in both cases, you would see a loss in each case, because I just did some math here. I mean, the Integrity Commission never said that. It just said what the income were and what the expenses were. But I'm saying if you have $5.1 million worth of income and $9.8 million worth of expenses, it would seem to me just average person in a loss position, right? So even if a nil return was filed and nil returns were filed, I'm trying to figure out how many years nil returns were filed. But even if you had filed a nil return according to the Integrity Commission, I'm not sure about whether there would have been a tax liability because of what I just said regarding the loss position, at least in the case of Imperium. Mr. Holness has also said that as far as he knows, the one that he's directly associated with, as far as he knows, it's compliant with the tax filings. But nevertheless, what the Integrity Commission said is that there were nil returns showing no activity. Yeah. I will tell you that as a business owner, when I first started business, right?
Yes.
I wasn't a business owner at first, as a journalist, as an independent journalist. And I will tell you that I too, sometimes because of the fact that I, let us say your account's not ready yet, you file a nil return and they amend it, right? There's a lot of people do that, okay? And that's what at first I was advised to do. No. In the States, When you have, let us say, the same problem, there's something you can file like an extension form that you need some more time to do it or whatever the case is. But in Jamaica, I don't think we have that. And so you really have to get it in on time. But you don't want to be delinquent. You don't want to file false, but you know, you file nil and then you amend. That is what I know that some people have done. I can tell you, I'm one of those that have done that. And then you amend the return, right? And I know I amend mine always if I file a nil return. I never heard in the Integrity Commission report of any amendment that occurred, right? So I could be one of those to that, you know, would say, okay, at some point or another, I had zero activity, zero, whatever the case is, but I know I amend mine every year, right? In terms of the actual thing. So what I'm saying is, I don't know if there was a tax liability, but what I can say to you, and I can read it to you, what the Integrity Commission report said regarding this whole issue, right? And they actually referred it to the TAG to investigate it as well, right? And this is something that's very important. I mean, millions of dollars worth of activity and no filing from the Integrity Commission's perspective, that's not okay, okay? So let's focus on what the Integrity Commission has to say about some of this stuff.
Yes,
right?
read out what they say about these filings, please.
So Imperium did file a nil return for 021 and 020.
Stay tuned for more PDTV news evening highlights. Thank you for watching.